Greetings, skateboarders. Welcome back to the Deck Cave for another installment of It's About Skateboarding with Truck Bolts here. And today what we're going to talk about, it's based on a conversation I had with my friend John Grigley about 4 years ago when we were in New York City. And we were noticing how the term legend has somehow changed and been watered down since when we were younger. Seems like everybody who's over a certain age gets to be a legend almost by like a participation trophy or something, you know. It's like the original meaning of legend, as I remember or understand it, wasn't somebody who was well documented. There wasn't 30 years of photos or videos or interviews with them. There was just either a first-hand account by a handful of credible people, maybe one photo that was so incredible that most people didn't even believe it was real, or maybe if there was footage or something, it just didn't translate what everybody was talking about. A legend was somebody who didn't necessarily stay around, or nobody really knows much about it. It's the person that the people that get called legends talk about. If you hear, you know, like Tony Hawk and some of his friends talking about some obscure skater you never heard of and what he could do, that's a legend. Now, I'm not saying that people like Tony Hawk and Tony Alva, Jay Adams, and you name it, people who contributed to skateboarding, who are icons of the sport, aren't important and aren't awesome and aren't rad. You know, I love them. It's like, it's who we are. We love watching the innovators and stuff. But to me, the legends that was like, there's a guy here and lives around here. He's slightly known. You might have seen a picture or video of him, maybe, but probably not. His name's Psycho Dave Ortiz. What he does on a skateboard is hard to photograph and hard to video. You have to be there. He'll come to a pool and not even do a trick and shut it down, and then just leave. And most, you have to be there to know Psycho Dave. After the riots back in the 80s, HB was on complete lockdown. If your skateboard touched the ground, the cops confiscated it. 4th of July, that place was just going off, and everybody was just hugging their skateboard for dear life. But not Psycho Dave. He came shooting down the middle of the street, did a giant power slide at 100 miles an hour barefoot on his vintage board right in front of the cops and the fire truck, and just zoomed off, and nobody even looked at him because he's Psycho Dave and he has something about him and he's legendary, and it's hard to describe who he is or what he is. So so I'm just saying that it seems like to me that gets changed a little. And we were kind of confused by how easily the word legend was thrown around. And that's what got me thinking about what legend really meant and what it represented. Now, that's not to say that people like Tony Hawk or anybody that's considered a legendary skateboarder didn't do legendary things or wasn't part of legendary events. In the early days of when I first met Mark Gonzalez, we'd just be skating down the street and he'd do one thing just off the top of his head that would never happen again, and nobody videoed it. And if you're just lucky enough to be looking in the right direction when it happened, you saw it and you were just, and I could tell you about it, but if you're not there, it's like, wow, you have to be there. So there's a million stories like that about him and about other skaters, especially in the earlier days when things weren't so heavily documented. Now, here's an example of a truly legendary event that I was lucky enough to be a part of that most people don't know about, but I'm going to share it with you now. This is going to be early 80s, and we're in Tampa, Florida, skating a small backyard ramp. And it wasn't the nicest ramp. We had the big St. Pete ramp that was really nice and perfect, but this ramp was smaller, kind of scrapped together in this kid's backyard. who wasn't as hardcore as we were. We normally didn't skate there. It was fun for kind of lip tricks, but it barely had any vert. And Warren Dunn was the kid's name, I believe. And so we were there having a little fun session, just a handful of us: Paul Schmidt, Bruce Whiteside, Tom Nicholson, Cleo Coney, myself, possibly Bill Procco. I don't remember everybody, but no more than those few people. And we're skating this ramp, having kind of some fun on it, messing around, and then all of a sudden Mike McGill walks in, because he's from Tampa. But normally Mike didn't usually show up to our sessions anymore. At this point he was, you know, getting to be more well-known and going around touring all the time and stuff. And he'd just come back from Sweden. We didn't know it, but he just came walking up and he says, "Hey guys, I want to show you this new trick I thought of." So he goes up, he just puts his pads on, gets on this ramp, which I'm telling you, this wasn't a great ramp. It was, doing an air over 2 feet out on it was hard. And Mike gets on it, a couple rock and rolls, does about 4 backside airs in a row, bam, McTwist. We didn't know what a McTwist was. He hadn't even gone to California yet and showed California the McTwist. It only had happened to Sweden. We had no idea what was coming. We all just were dumbfounded. We literally all just sat in the circle in the yard for like 2 hours and just tried to comprehend what happened. It was like, we didn't know what, and he just did it like that, like it was no thing. He was a man on a mission. And years later, Paul told him about it. He doesn't even remember, because he was just on a mission. He had learned that trick and he was going to go to California and kick some ass, and he did. But that little moment in time, that was a truly legendary thing. And if you're lucky enough to be something like that, it's cool. And like I say, this is all just talk to everybody else. You weren't there. I don't have any pictures. Mike doesn't even remember. But you ask any of our crew that was there, and they will confirm it with definite look of telling the truth in their face, because it was truly one of the most shocking skateboard moments in my life. We weren't prepared. It wasn't like he tried a few or he told us we knew what was coming. It just was like, hey, I got a new trick, boom. And we just were dumbfounded. So that's my rant on legends and legendary stuff, and a little way to tell my story about Mike. So hopefully nobody's all mad at me, you know. I mean, I'm not trying to tell anybody what's right or wrong. Believe me, as a industry person, somebody who's been in the industry my whole life, and others like me that have spent our whole life being part of this and making our living off of it. Basically what we did was when I say we, I mean me too, we went and saw the Wizard. When we saw the Wizard and we saw there was just a man behind the curtain that was running the whole thing, instead of going, hey everybody, there's just some guy running the, you know, this is just some sham, the guy behind the curtain, it's all facade. No, we ran back there, got ourselves a job. Hey, you got any work back here for us? Pulled the curtain back. And there's nothing wrong with that. You got to make a living somehow, but come on. I'm being honest with myself, that's what I did. So there you have it. All right. So hopefully I didn't piss too many people off, but you know, Phelps and Grosso are gone now. Somebody's got to regulate our old asses and not let us get too cocky. So that brings me to another subject, which is inventing a trick. That's another term that's kind of the definition isn't quite the way we're using it. You can't really invent a trick. The fact that a skateboard, physics allows a skateboard to ollie or lock into a Smith grind or flip whichever way, it's just a fact of the physical universe. And you might, in a sort of scientific trial and error way, discover a trick and master the technique to do that trick. You don't really invent a trick. I mean, it's like not something you go and have to build the trick, you know, or, you know. So calling it inventing a trick is kind of not really correct in its definition. And then there's a lot of discussion and arguments about who invented the trick or who did it first, which also is hard to pin down who did it first. Sometimes it's possible somewhat, but I've seen kids that don't know what they're doing learning to skateboard grab every which way, mute, slob, you name it, wheedle, however you know, it doesn't matter. There's some skateboarding is when you don't know what you're doing, people just try stuff and experiment, and sometimes it's done somewhere else at the same time. But so what we really need to say, instead of saying who invented a trick or who did it first, is who popularized a trick. Because at the end of the day, that's what's going to matter. Dwayne Peters popularized the indie air. Gunnar Hogo, you know, was in the magazines before that doing it, but it doesn't matter. Dwayne Peters popularized it, so now that's how we're going to remember it. Just like a song, the person that writes a song, take for instance Carl Perkins wrote Blue Suede Shoes. Now I said Blue Suede Shoes, and the first thought that came to your mind was Elvis Presley, because he popularized it. But truth is, Carl Perkins actually had a #1 hit before Elvis with the same exact song. But that doesn't matter that I tell you that, because Blue Suede Shoes and Elvis are always going to be together. And that's the same with tricks. Whoever popularizes it or gives it that special thing that makes it catch on is going to get the credit. And that's not that person being, you know, some people act like people are trying to lie or, you know, take credit from them or something. They're not. It's just the way it works out. Sometimes whoever popularized the trick is going to get it. And like I say, that's just exactly the way music is. There's lots of your favorite songs that were written and recorded by somebody else years before, but the version that you heard is the one that resonates with you. Now, I'm not saying all this trying to act like I'm all smarter and better than everybody else. I'm just tired of everybody arguing over stuff that really isn't an argument. If you know a fact about something, enjoy the fact that you know it, but don't argue with somebody else who wasn't there, who doesn't know, or who has their information a different way, or their memory and their influence in the popularity of that moment was different for them. Because we're all just having fun, and we're just, whoever thinks of something or whoever popularizes it, that's just great, because that means now it's more people can try it and have fun in a different way, and it just grows and builds on building blocks. So we're all just part of a big series of events. It's not about one thing or one person. It's about all of us and all the contributions, and the contributions from the guy who's, like, I remember people that couldn't really axle stall right, and they basically did a feeble axle stall every time they'd ride the half pipe. But we didn't call it a feeble. We didn't know that's just the way that guy did it, and we would kind of go, whoa, you know, but he didn't, you know, or popularize it or invent it or anything. It just, the way he did it, that was what was comfortable for him, and that happens all the time. And that's what's beautiful about skateboarding, because sometimes somebody really good will see somebody doing something that has a quirky way of doing something. They'll go, oh, wait a minute, and boom, there we have it, some amazing trick done by one of our wonderful icons of the sport that are probably all going to get mad at me after this. No, anyway, I love all you guys, love skateboarding, skateboard as much as possible. This is Truck Bolt saying goodbye, goodbye.